In the year 1830, the United States government passed a law that changed the lives of thousands of Native Americans forever. The law was called the Indian Removal Act. At first, many people did not fully understand what this law would become. Some believed it was only about moving tribes farther west. Others believed the government would protect Native families during the move. But very quickly, the truth became clear. This law was not about protection. It was about land. The United States was growing fast during the early 1800s. More white settlers wanted farmland in the South. They wanted rivers. They wanted forests. They wanted gold. And much of that land belonged to Native American tribes. For many years, Native tribes had already lived there. Long before the United States existed, long before American presidents and state governments. These lands were home to powerful native nations. Among them were 5 major tribes, often called the 5 civilized tribes. They were the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. The Cherokee Nation was one of the strongest. The Cherokee people had built towns, farms, schools, and courts. Many Cherokee families lived in wooden houses. Some owned businesses. Some even created newspapers printed in both English and the Cherokee language. A man named Dare, better known as Sequoyah, created a writing system for the Cherokee language. It was one of the greatest achievements in Native American history. Because of this system, thousands of Cherokee people learned to read and write very quickly. The Cherokee Nation also created its own constitution. It was similar to the Constitution of the United States. The Cherokee leaders believed something important. They believed if they adapted to some American ways, they could survive beside the United States peacefully. But many American leaders did not care, especially leaders in the southern states. One state became extremely aggressive against the Cherokee Nation. That state was Georgia. Georgia leaders wanted Cherokee land badly, and then something happened that made everything worse. Gold was discovered in Georgia in 1828. Suddenly, thousands of white settlers rushed into Cherokee territory. People wanted money, people wanted land, and politicians wanted control. The pressure on the Cherokee Nation became enormous. At the center of all this stood one powerful man, President Andrew Jackson. Jackson was already famous before becoming president. He had been a military leader. Many Americans saw him as a hero, but many Native Americans feared him deeply. Jackson believed Native tribes should move west of the Mississippi River. He believed white expansion was more important than Native land rights. When he became president in 1829, he strongly supported Indian removal. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. The law gave the president power to negotiate removal treaties with Native tribes. Supporters of the law claimed relocation would protect Native Americans from violence. But many Native leaders saw the truth immediately. The government was forcing them away from their homes. Many Americans opposed the law too. Some church leaders spoke against it. Some politicians warned it was cruel and unjust. One important voice against the law was Congressman Davy Crockett. He openly criticized Andrew Jackson. He believed the government was betraying Native tribes. But Jackson had enormous political power, and the law passed anyway. For the Cherokee Nation, danger was growing fast. Georgia state officials began attacking Cherokee sovereignty. They passed laws claiming Cherokee land belonged to Georgia. Cherokee courts lost authority. Cherokee meetings became restricted. Even Cherokee goldfields were seized. The Cherokee Nation decided to fight back, using the American legal system. Their leaders believed the United States Supreme Court would defend treaty rights. One major Cherokee leader became the face of this struggle. His name was John Ross. John Ross was calm, intelligent, and deeply respected. He believed the Cherokee Nation should stay on its ancestral land. He fought through diplomacy instead of violence. Under his leadership, the Cherokee Nation brought an important case to the Supreme Court. The case became known as Cherokee Nation v. Georgia. In 1831, the court made a complicated decision. The judges refused to fully hear the Cherokee case. They claimed the Cherokee Nation was not a foreign nation under American law. For the Cherokee people, it was a painful setback. But the fight did not end there. Another case soon reached the Supreme Court. This case became one of the most important Native American legal battles in history. It was called Worcester v. Georgia. The case involved a white missionary named Samuel Worcester. Georgia had arrested him because he lived in Cherokee territory without state permission. But the real issue was much bigger. Did Georgia have legal power inside Cherokee lands? In 1832, the Supreme Court gave its answer. Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that the Cherokee Nation was a distinct political community. The court said Georgia laws had no force inside Cherokee territory. For a brief moment, it seemed the Cherokee Nation had won. The Supreme Court had recognized Cherokee rights. But there was a huge problem. The court had no army. It could not force states or presidents to obey. And President Andrew Jackson refused to strongly support the ruling. A famous quote is often linked to Jackson. "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." Historians still debate whether Jackson said those exact words. But one thing is certain. Jackson did not protect the Cherokee Nation after the ruling. Georgia continued attacking Cherokee lands. White settlers kept moving in, and pressure for removal became stronger every month. Inside the Cherokee Nation, divisions began to grow. Most Cherokee people supported John Ross and wanted to remain. But a smaller group believed removal could no longer be stopped. They feared complete destruction if they resisted forever. One of the leaders of this smaller group was Major Ridge. Major Ridge was respected for his military service and leadership, but he believed the United States would eventually take Cherokee land by force, no matter what happened. He believed the Cherokee people should negotiate the best possible terms before it was too late. This disagreement slowly divided the Cherokee Nation into dangerous political camps. Families argued. Communities split apart. Fear spread everywhere. And meanwhile, the United States government continued pushing removal plans harder and harder. Then came the treaty that changed everything forever. In 1835, a small group of Cherokee leaders signed a document called the Treaty of New Echota. The treaty agreed to give up all Cherokee lands east of the Mississippi River. In exchange, the Cherokee would move west to Indian Territory. Today, much of that land is in Oklahoma. But there was a major problem. The treaty was not approved by most Cherokee people. John Ross and thousands of Cherokee citizens strongly opposed it. In fact, over 15,000 Cherokee people signed petitions against the treaty. That was an enormous number at the time. But the United States Senate approved the treaty anyway. The government now claimed removal was legal. The Cherokee people were given a deadline to leave their homes. Many hoped the government would still change its mind. Many believed reason and justice would eventually win. But they were wrong. Very soon, soldiers would arrive. And one of the darkest chapters in Native American history would begin. Part 2. In the spring of 1838, fear spread across the Cherokee Nation. Families had heard rumors for months. American soldiers were coming. The government had decided the Cherokee people would leave their homeland by force. Many still hoped it would not happen. Some believed negotiations might continue. Others prayed the army would show mercy. But then the soldiers arrived. Thousands of troops entered Cherokee territory under the command of General Winfield Scott. Scott had fought in major American wars. Now he carried out one of the largest forced removals in American history. His orders came directly from President Martin Van Buren, who had taken office after Andrew Jackson. The government gave the Cherokee people almost no time to prepare. Soldiers entered homes suddenly. Families were forced outside at gunpoint. Many people were not allowed to gather their belongings. Some left behind food, tools, family records, and sacred objects. Others lost farms they had built over generations. The shock was overwhelming. One Cherokee survivor later remembered hearing women crying everywhere. Children screamed in fear. Old people begged for more time. But the soldiers continued their orders. Many Cherokee people were gathered into temporary prison camps called stockades. These camps were crowded and filthy. Food was limited. Clean water was difficult to find. Diseases spread quickly. Some people died before the journey west even began. For the Cherokee Nation, the pain was not only physical, it was emotional, spiritual. Entire communities were being erased from their homeland. The Cherokee had deep connections to their land. Their ancestors were buried there. Their history lived there. Their traditions belonged there. Now they were being removed from it forever. At first, the government planned to move the Cherokee mostly by river, but the heat of summer became dangerous. Disease increased. Many Cherokee leaders feared thousands would die. So the removal plan changed. Most Cherokee groups would travel west by land during colder months. The journey would become one of the most painful forced migrations in American history. Today, it is remembered as the Trail of Tears. The name came from the terrible suffering people experienced along the way. The Cherokee were not the only tribe forced west during this period. The Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations also suffered removal. Thousands died during those relocations too. But the Cherokee Trail of Tears became one of the most recognized symbols of Native suffering in American history. By late 1838, groups of Cherokee families began marching westward. Some traveled in wagons, some rode horses. Many walked the entire distance. The journey stretched for nearly 1,000 miles. The routes crossed multiple states. The travelers moved through Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas before reaching Indian territory. Conditions quickly became terrible. The roads were muddy and rough. Rains soaked clothing and blankets. Cold winds hit families during winter travel. Many people had little protection from the weather. Food supplies often ran low. Some families became weak from hunger. Disease spread constantly. Measles, whooping cough, pneumonia, dysentery. Doctors were limited. Medicine was scarce. And people were exhausted every single day. Children suffered badly during the journey. Many became sick from cold and hunger. Some died in their mother's arms. Elderly Cherokee struggled too. Some could not continue walking. Others collapsed beside the road. Families faced impossible choices: keep moving or risk punishment and separation. One Cherokee woman later described hearing crying almost every night. People mourned quietly around campfires. Some buried loved ones beside the trail and continued walking the next morning. There was rarely enough time for proper ceremonies. The grief became endless. One missionary traveling with the Cherokee described seeing wagons carrying sick children wrapped in blankets. He said the suffering was worse than anything he had ever witnessed. Death followed the Cherokee constantly during the march west. Historians estimate around 4,000 Cherokee people died during removal. Some estimates are even higher. That meant nearly 1 out of every 4 Cherokee people lost their lives. For many families, entire bloodlines disappeared. And yet, even during terrible suffering, Cherokee leaders tried to protect their people. John Ross continued helping organize groups during the journey. He traveled with his people instead of abandoning them. He worked to improve food supplies and reduce suffering where possible. But the scale of the disaster was enormous. There was only so much anyone could do. Along the routes, some local Americans showed kindness. A few communities gave food or blankets to Cherokee families. Some church groups tried to help the sick. But many Americans ignored the suffering completely. Others saw removal as progress. Newspapers in some states celebrated native removal because it opened land for white settlement. That reality deeply wounded native communities. The government that promised protection had instead destroyed thousands of lives. During the journey, Cherokee people tried to preserve their identity. Some continued singing traditional songs quietly at night. Some elders told stories to children around fires. Others prayed together. Even during terrible loss, they refused to completely lose who they were. That resistance mattered deeply, because removal was not only about land, it also threatened native culture, language, and memory. The United States government wanted tribes removed from the East, but many native people feared something even larger, that future generations might forget who they were. As the Cherokee traveled west, many looked back one final time toward their homeland. Some believed they would never see those mountains and rivers again. And they were right. Most never returned. The journey continued month after month. Exhaustion covered every camp. People walked through snow and freezing rain. Some had no shoes left. Others wrapped cloth around bleeding feet. Animals pulling wagons often became weak too. Sometimes wagons broke completely. Families then had to carry belongings by hand. One Cherokee survivor later remembered hearing almost no laughter during the journey. Only silence, crying, and prayers. The emotional damage became impossible to measure. Parents blamed themselves for not protecting children. Children watched grandparents die beside roads. Brothers and sisters became separated, and every mile westward reminded the Cherokee people that they were being removed from a homeland they never wanted to leave. At the same time, white settlers quickly moved into abandoned Cherokee lands back east. Homes were taken, farms were claimed, gold fields were seized. Many Americans became wealthy from lands that had belonged to native families for generations. This was one of the hidden truths behind removal. Economic greed played a huge role. The government spoke about peace and protection, but land hunger drove much of the policy, and native communities paid the price. By early 1839, surviving Cherokee groups finally reached Indian territory. But the suffering did not end when the march stopped. Many arrived sick, starving, and emotionally broken. Thousands of people were dead. Entire families were gone, and deep political anger was now growing inside the Cherokee Nation itself. Because many blamed the Treaty of New Echota leaders for everything that had happened. Very soon, violence inside the Cherokee Nation would explode. In the year 1839, the Cherokee people had finally reached Indian territory. But there was no feeling of victory, no feeling of peace. The Trail of Tears had ended physically, yet emotionally, the suffering was still alive. Thousands of Cherokee people arrived weak and broken. Many were sick. Many had lost parents, children, husbands or wives during the journey west. And now another danger was growing inside the Cherokee Nation itself. Anger. Deep anger. Many Cherokee people blamed the leaders who signed the Treaty of New Echota. To most Cherokee citizens, the treaty was illegal. They believed those leaders had sold Cherokee land without permission from the people. And because of that treaty, the forced removal happened. One of the most hated names became Major Ridge. Years earlier, Major Ridge believed removal could not be stopped. He thought signing a treaty might save the Cherokee Nation from complete destruction. His son, John Ridge, also supported the agreement. Another treaty supporter was Elias Boudinot. Boudinot had once edited the Cherokee newspaper. He was educated and respected by many Americans. But after the Trail of Tears, many Cherokee people saw these men as traitors. Tension became extremely dangerous. For years, Cherokee law had declared that giving away tribal land without permission from the people was punishable by death. Now emotions were exploding across the nation. Families argued constantly. Communities became divided. Some wanted revenge. Others feared civil war. Then violence finally came. On June 22, 1839, coordinated attacks were carried out against major treaty supporters. Major Ridge was killed. John Ridge was killed. Elias Boudinot was also murdered. These killings shocked both Native and American communities. For some Cherokee people, the attacks were justice. For others, they were tragic acts that deepened division even further. One treaty supporter survived. His name was Stand Watie. Stand Watie escaped assassination and would later become one of the most important figures in Cherokee history. The violence after removal showed how deeply the Trail of Tears had damaged the Cherokee Nation. The pain was not only caused by death and relocation, it also destroyed trust between Cherokee people themselves. Meanwhile, life in Indian Territory remained difficult. The land was unfamiliar. Many families had to rebuild homes from nothing. Farms needed to be started again. Government systems had to be rebuilt. And grief still surrounded almost every family. Yet even after enormous suffering, the Cherokee Nation survived. That survival became one of the most powerful parts of Native American history. The Cherokee rebuilt schools. They rebuilt courts. They rebuilt their government. Leaders worked to preserve Cherokee language and traditions. They refused to disappear. That resilience shocked many Americans who believed removal would permanently destroy native nations. But the Cherokee people were not alone in suffering during this era. Other tribes experienced terrible removals too. The Choctaw Nation suffered one of the earliest removals after the Indian Removal Act. In the early 1830s, thousands of Choctaw families were forced west. The conditions became so terrible that one Choctaw chief called the removal a trail of tears and death. Many historians believe this phrase later influenced the famous name connected to the Cherokee journey. The Creek Nation also faced violence and forced relocation. After land conflicts and resistance, thousands of Creek people were removed west under military control. The Seminole Nation fought back more fiercely than many other tribes. In Florida, the Seminole people resisted removal during a long conflict called the Seminole Wars. One important Seminole leader became famous across the country. His name was Osceola. Osceola refused to surrender easily. He led resistance fighters through swamps and forests against American troops. The war became expensive and deadly for the United States. Eventually, Osceola was captured during peace negotiations under a white flag. Many Americans criticized the capture as dishonorable. Osceola later died in prison in 1838. Even after his death, some Seminole groups continued resisting for years. Unlike many other tribes, some Seminole communities managed to remain in Florida. The removal era transformed the entire United States. Millions of acres of native land were opened to white settlers. Southern agriculture expanded rapidly. Cotton production increased enormously, and slavery spread deeper across the South. This connection is important to understand. Native removal and slavery expansion were closely linked. As native tribes were forced away, slave plantations often replaced them. Many politicians and wealthy landowners benefited financially from this expansion. The human cost for native nations, however, was devastating. Entire societies were uprooted, sacred burial grounds were abandoned, ancient communities disappeared from their ancestral lands forever, and the emotional trauma lasted for generations. Many native families continued telling stories about removal long after it ended. Grandparents spoke about lost homes. Parents described family members who died during the journey. Children grew up hearing memories filled with grief and survival. These stories became part of tribal identity. The Trail of Tears also changed how some Americans viewed the government. Critics argued the United States had broken treaties and ignored its own laws. Remember, the Supreme Court had ruled in favor of Cherokee rights in Worcester versus Georgia, but the government still removed the Cherokee anyway. That reality raised painful questions about justice and power in America. Could native treaties truly be trusted? Would the government protect minority rights when land and money were involved? For native communities, those questions became deeply personal. Even decades later, distrust remained strong. And there was another painful truth. Many American history books for years barely explained native suffering during removal. Some schools described Indian removal as simple relocation. Others ignored native voices completely. But native communities never forgot. Cherokee storytellers preserved memories carefully. Songs, oral histories, and written records kept the truth alive. Over time, more Americans slowly began recognizing the full horror of what happened. Historians studied survivor accounts. Museums documented removal routes. And native leaders continued educating younger generations about the past. Today, the Trail of Tears is remembered as one of the darkest chapters in United States history. Not because of a single battle, not because of one moment, but because an entire government policy forced thousands of innocent people from their homes, and many died because of it. Yet the story is also about survival, because despite enormous suffering, native nations endured. The Cherokee Nation still exists today. So do the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. Their cultures survived attempts to erase them. Their languages survived. Their traditions survived. And their history survived. But the struggle between native nations and the United States government was far from over. In the decades ahead, new wars, broken treaties, and forced policies would continue across the American West. And native people would once again face impossible choices between resistance and survival. Part 4. In the 1840s and 1850s, the United States continued expanding westward. Many Americans believed the nation had a special right to spread across the continent. This belief became known as manifest destiny. Supporters claimed the United States was meant to control land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. But for Native Americans, this idea brought fear and destruction, because every step westward meant more native land would be taken. Even after the Trail of Tears, native nations were not left alone. The government had promised Indian territory would belong to removed tribes forever, but those promises did not last long. As American settlers moved farther west, pressure for more land returned again. New territories became battle zones between native nations and the United States Army. In the Great Plains, powerful tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Comanche, and Kiowa defended their homelands fiercely. These tribes depended heavily on buffalo herds. Buffalo were central to food, clothing, tools, and spiritual life. But American expansion threatened everything. Railroads crossed native lands, settlers built towns, miners searched for gold, and soldiers built military forts across the West. Violence slowly increased. At first, some native leaders tried diplomacy. They signed treaties, hoping peace could survive. But many treaties were broken almost immediately. One important agreement came in 1851. It was called the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The treaty involved several Plains tribes and the United States government. It promised certain lands would belong to native nations. In return, tribes allowed safer travel routes for settlers moving west. But within years, American violations began. Gold discoveries once again changed everything. In 1858, gold was found near the Rocky Mountains. Thousands of miners rushed into native territories illegally. The government failed to stop them, and conflict exploded again. For many native communities, this pattern became painfully familiar. Treaty, promise, broken promise, land seizure, war, again and again. One terrible example came during the Civil War era. In 1864, Colorado militia attacked a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho camp. The attack became known as the Sand Creek Massacre. The camp had raised an American flag to show peace. Many men were away hunting. Inside the camp were women, children, and elderly people. But soldiers attacked anyway. More than 100 native people were killed. Many bodies were mutilated afterward. The massacre horrified even some Americans. Witnesses described horrifying scenes. The event increased native anger across the plains, and violence grew even larger afterward. During this period, another major native leader rose to prominence. His name was Red Cloud. Red Cloud was a powerful Lakota chief. He understood American expansion threatened Lakota survival completely. When the United States built forts along the Bozeman Trail through Lakota hunting lands, Red Cloud resisted. His warriors attacked military routes and forts repeatedly. The conflict became known as Red Cloud's War. Surprisingly, Red Cloud achieved something rare. In 1868, the United States agreed to abandon certain forts and sign another Fort Laramie Treaty. The treaty recognized Lakota control over the Black Hills region. For a moment, it seemed native resistance had succeeded. But once again, promises would not last. In the 1870s, gold was discovered in the Black Hills. The Black Hills were sacred to the Lakota people. Yet miners flooded the area illegally. The government failed to remove them. Instead, officials demanded the Lakota sell the land. Many Lakota leaders refused. One of the strongest voices against surrender was Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull believed giving up the Black Hills would destroy Lakota identity. Another famous warrior also rose during this time. His name was Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse became legendary for bravery in battle. As tensions grew, war erupted again between native nations and the United States Army. Then came one of the most famous battles in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. In 1876, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led troops against a large native encampment. The camp included Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Custer underestimated native strength badly. The Native Alliance overwhelmed his forces completely. Custer and many of his soldiers were killed. For Native nations, the battle became a symbol of resistance. For many Americans, it became a shocking national humiliation. But the United States responded with even greater military force afterward. More troops entered native lands. Buffalo herds were destroyed rapidly.
This was devastating, because without buffalo, Plains tribes lost food and economic survival. Some American officials openly supported buffalo destruction to weaken native resistance. Starvation spread across native communities. Eventually, many tribes were forced onto reservations. Reservations were controlled lands assigned by the government. Native movement became restricted. Traditional hunting became difficult. Children increasingly faced pressure to abandon native languages and customs. And government control grew stronger every year. One of the darkest policies involved native children themselves. American officials believed native culture should disappear entirely. A military officer named Richard Henry Pratt promoted harsh assimilation policies. His famous phrase became deeply controversial: "Kill the Indian, save the man." Pratt believed native children should be separated from families and forced into American culture.
Boarding schools were created across the country. Native children were taken far from home. Many had their hair cut immediately. Traditional clothing was removed. Native languages were often forbidden. Children could be punished for speaking their own language. Some students experienced physical abuse. Others suffered loneliness and trauma for years. Many parents had little power to stop it. For Native communities, boarding schools became another painful chapter after removal and war. Culture itself was now under attack. Yet Native people continued resisting in many ways. Some resisted openly through political action. Others resisted quietly by preserving language and traditions inside families. Grandparents secretly taught songs and stories. Ceremonies continued in hidden ways. And Native identity survived despite enormous pressure. By the late 1800s, many Americans believed Native resistance had ended. But Native nations themselves knew survival was still possible. Even after wars, forced removal, massacres, and assimilation policies, Native cultures remained alive. And one final tragic event in 1890 would show the world how violent the conflict between Native nations and the United States had become. Part 5. In the winter of 1890, fear spread across Native communities across the American West. For decades, Native nations had lost land, freedom, and power. Buffalo herds were nearly gone. Many tribes were confined to reservations. Families struggled with hunger and poverty. And government control touched almost every part of Native life. But during this painful time, a spiritual movement began spreading among Native tribes. It was called the Ghost Dance. The movement started with a Paiute spiritual leader named Wovoka. Wovoka taught a message of peace and hope. He said Native people should pray, live honestly, and perform sacred dances. He believed this spiritual movement would renew the world. Many Native people believed the ghost dance could bring healing after years of suffering. Some believed dead ancestors would return. Others believed buffalo herds would come back. Many hoped white expansion would finally end. For Native communities facing enormous despair,
The movement gave emotional strength. But American officials became frightened by it. Government agents misunderstood the ghost dance completely. Many feared it was a sign of rebellion, especially among the Lakota people. Reservation officials reported growing tension, and the United States Army prepared for military action once again. One of the most respected Lakota leaders during this time was Sitting Bull. Even though Sitting Bull did not fully lead the ghost dance movement, many officials blamed him for native resistance. In December 1890, Indian police attempted to arrest Sitting Bull. During the confrontation, gunfire erupted. Sitting Bull was killed. His death shocked native communities deeply. Many Lakota followers fled in fear afterward. One group traveled south under a leader named Bigfoot. Bigfoot and his people hoped to find safety, but American soldiers intercepted them near a place called Wounded Knee Massacre in South Dakota. The Lakota group included many women and children. Most were weak from sickness and winter travel. Soldiers surrounded the camp and demanded weapons. Tension filled the air. Then suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Nobody knows exactly who fired first, but within moments, chaos exploded everywhere. American soldiers opened fire using rifles and rapid-fire Hotchkiss guns. Lakota men tried to protect families. Women ran holding children. Some attempted to escape through snow-covered fields, but gunfire followed them. The killing became horrific. By the end, around 250 to 300 Lakota people were dead. Many were women and children. Some bodies were later found frozen in the snow. The Wounded Knee Massacre shocked the world. For many historians, it marked the symbolic end of the Indian Wars. After centuries of resistance, native nations had been crushed militarily by the expanding United States. But native people themselves did not disappear. That is one of the most important truths in Native American history. Even after forced removals, even after massacres, even after broken treaties and boarding schools, native nations survived. Throughout the 1900s, native communities continued fighting for rights and recognition. Many tribes worked to preserve languages that were once banned. Others fought legal battles to recover land and treaty rights. Native veterans served in the United States military during major wars. Native artists, writers, and leaders helped educate future generations about true Native history. One important change came during the 20th century. More Americans slowly began learning the truth about policies like the Trail of Tears. Historians studied survivor accounts carefully. Museums and memorials were created. Schools slowly improved how Native history was taught. But many Native leaders argued the damage was still not fully understood. Because Native suffering was not only about the past, its effects continued across generations. Poverty, lost land, language decline, cultural trauma. These wounds did not disappear quickly. Still, Native communities continued rebuilding. Today, the Cherokee Nation remains one of the largest Native nations in the United States. The Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, Seminole, Lakota, Navajo, Apache, and many other tribes continue protecting their cultures and sovereignty. Powwows, ceremonies, traditional arts, and native languages are still practiced today. Young Native leaders continue teaching history to future generations, and many tribes now operate schools, businesses, courts, and governments of their own. The survival of Native nations became an act of resistance itself, because for centuries, many policies tried to erase Native identity completely. But they failed. The story of the Trail of Tears is not only about death and removal. It is also about resilience.
about people who endured unimaginable suffering and still carried their culture forward. It reminds the world how dangerous greed and unchecked power can become. The United States government signed treaties promising protection. Then many of those promises were broken. Native nations trusted agreements that were later ignored, and thousands of innocent people paid the price. The story also forces difficult questions about history. Who gets remembered? Whose pain is ignored? And how should nations face the truth about their past? For many years, Native voices were pushed aside in American history books. But today, more people are finally listening. Cherokee descendants still honor ancestors who walked the Trail of Tears.
Some families preserve names of relatives who died during removal.
Historic routes are now marked across several states, and every year, Native communities continue remembering what happened. Not to create hatred, but to protect truth. Because forgetting history can allow injustice to happen again. The Trail of Tears remains one of the clearest examples of how government power, land hunger, and racism can destroy entire communities. But it is also proof of something else, that even after enormous suffering, people can survive, cultures can survive, and truth can survive. The voices of those who walked the Trail of Tears were never fully silenced, and their story still speaks today.